I left the house before her, told her I might be out late, kissed her goodbye like it was any other day. But instead of going to meet my imaginary friend, I parked my car 2 blocks away and waited. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel in my throat. My hands were sweating. I felt like I might throw up. What was I doing? What had become of me, of us, that I was sitting in my car preparing to follow my own wife like she was a suspect in some crime? Please tell me your name, the city you're watching me from, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. At 6:15, I saw her car pull out of our driveway. She turned left, heading toward the downtown area where her office was located. See? I told myself. She's going to work just like she said. You're being ridiculous. Go home. Forget this ever happened. But I didn't go home. I followed her, keeping a safe distance, my stomach churning with a mixture of guilt and dread and terrible, irresistible curiosity. She didn't go to her office. She drove right past it. Continued into a part of town I wasn't familiar with, a neighborhood of older homes and tree-lined streets. I followed, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. Finally, she pulled into the driveway of a small craftsman-style house with a well-maintained yard and a porch light that glowed warm yellow in the gathering dusk. I parked down the street, far enough away that she wouldn't notice my car, close enough that I could see what was happening. She got out of her car, and that's when I saw something that made my blood run cold. She was carrying flowers, a bouquet of roses. Why would she be bringing flowers to a late work meeting? I watched as she walked up the front door. She didn't knock. She had a key. She let herself in like she'd done it 100 times before. I sat there in my car, frozen, my mind racing through possibilities, each one worse than the last. This was it. This was the moment where everything I'd feared was about to be confirmed. There was someone else. She was having an affair. All those late nights, all those secretive phone calls, all those mysterious smiles, they were for someone else. The pain that hit me was physical. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it was about to burst. 28 years. 28 years of marriage, of commitment, of promises and shared dreams and building a life together. And it was ending here, with me sitting alone in my car on a strange street, watching my wife walk into another man's house with flowers in her arms. I don't know how long I sat there. Time seemed to stop, to become meaningless. It could have been 10 minutes or an hour. I was paralyzed, unable to decide what to do next. Should I march up to that door and confront her? Should I drive away and pretend I'd never seen this? Should I wait to see when she came out, how long she stayed? But then something happened that I didn't expect. The front door opened again and my wife came out. But she wasn't alone. She was with someone, and they were both carrying something. I squinted, trying to see better in the dimming light. It was an older woman, elderly, actually, probably in her 80s. She was using a walker, moving slowly, carefully, and my wife was beside her, holding her arm, steadying her, helping her down the porch steps with the kind of gentle patience you'd show someone very fragile. I watched, confused now, as my wife helped this woman into her car, folded up the walker and placed it in the trunk. They drove off together, and without really thinking about what I was doing, I followed again. They went to a restaurant, a nice one, the kind with white tablecloths and candles on the tables. I parked across the street and watched through the window as my wife and this elderly woman were seated. I could see them talking. See my wife leaning in close like she was listening intently to whatever the older woman was saying. At one point, my wife reached across the table and took the woman's hand. Who was this person? Why was my wife having dinner with her? Why had she been carrying flowers into that house? None of this made any sense. This wasn't an affair, at least not the kind I'd imagined. But it was still a secret, still something she'd been hiding from me for weeks or months. I felt a strange mixture of relief and confusion and anger. Relief that she was with another man, confusion about what I was actually witnessing, and anger that she'd been lying to me, keeping this from me, whatever this was. I stayed in my car, watching them through the restaurant window. They had dinner. They talked. At one point, I saw my wife wipe tears from her eyes. The older woman reached over and patted her hand, said something that made my wife smile through her tears. After dinner, they drove back to the house. Again, I followed, feeling less like a detective now and more like a stalker, but unable to stop myself. I had to see this through. I had to understand. My wife helped the elderly woman back into the house. This time, she stayed longer. Much longer. It was dark now, fully dark, and I sat in my car in the shadows, waiting, wondering, my mind spinning with theories and questions. Nearly 2 hours passed before my wife emerged. She looked exhausted. Even from this distance, I could see the weight of something heavy on her shoulders. She sat in her car for a long moment before starting the engine, and I thought I saw her wipe her eyes again. I drove home quickly, making sure to arrive before her. I was sitting in my chair, pretending to watch TV, when she came in around 9:30. "How was your meeting?" I asked, keeping my voice casual even though my heart was racing. "Exhausting," she said, and at least that wasn't a lie. "I'm going to head straight to bed. Hope you had a good time with your friend." The irony of that moment wasn't lost on me. We were both liars now, both keeping secrets, both pretending to be something we weren't. But I couldn't confront her. Not yet, because I still didn't understand what I'd seen. Who was that woman? Why was my wife spending every Thursday evening with her? Why the secrecy? I did something I'm not proud of the next day. I looked through her car while she was in the shower. I found a receipt from the restaurant, but nothing else revealing. No love letters, no incriminating evidence, just a detritus of a normal life. Old parking stubs, a few business cards, some loose change. Then I found it, tucked into the side pocket of the driver's door. A small notebook, the kind you might use for a diary or a journal. My hands trembled as I opened it. I knew I was crossing a line, violating her privacy in a way that couldn't be undone. But I'd come too far to stop now. The entries were brief, dated, mostly about her visits with someone named Eleanor. Eleanor was having a bad day today. She couldn't remember my name for a while. Kept calling me Susan. Broke my heart. Took Eleanor to her favorite restaurant. She told me the story about how she met her husband for the 10th time. I never get tired of hearing it. Eleanor asked about her son again. I didn't have the heart to remind her that he's gone. My chest tightened as I read. This wasn't an affair. This was something else entirely. Something I still didn't fully understand, but that was clearly causing my wife pain. Pain she'd been bearing alone. I kept searching, kept looking for answers. I found them a week later, when I finally worked up the courage to do something I'd never done before in our entire marriage. I looked through her. Email. I know how terrible that is. I know what it says about me, about who I'd become in my desperate need to know the truth. But I was past the point of caring about my own moral boundaries. I needed to understand. It took me a while to find it, buried in a folder labeled personal. There were emails going back months, correspondence with a lawyer with a social services agency, with what appeared to be a care facility. And slowly, piece by piece, the truth began to emerge. Eleanor Whitmore, 83 years old, advanced Alzheimer's disease. No living relatives except for a son who had died 3 years ago in a car accident. My wife had been her son's colleague at work. They'd been friends, my wife and Eleanor's son. When he died, Eleanor had no one. The emails told the story. The care facility Eleanor had been in was shutting down. She had no family to advocate for her, no one to help her transition to a new place. The state was going to move her to a public facility. The kind of place with overwhelmed staff and warehouse-style rooms and the smell of disinfectant failing to mask worse odors. And my wife who I'd suspected of betraying me, had decided to do something about it. She'd found Eleanor a small house to rent. She'd hired part-time caregivers to check on her during the day. She was paying for all of it, the house, the care, the expenses, out of her own salary, her own savings. She visited every Thursday evening, brought her flowers, took her to dinner, sat with her even when Eleanor couldn't remember who she was. The emails to the lawyer were about setting up a trust, making sure Eleanor would be taken care of if anything happened to my wife. The emails to social services were my wife navigating bureaucracy, filling out forms, making sure everything was legal and proper. I sat at her computer, staring at the screen, tears running down my face. This was her secret. This was what she'd been hiding from me. Not an affair, not betrayal, but this tremendous act of compassion and kindness that she'd undertaken completely alone. But why? Why hadn't she told me? Why the secrecy? Why lie about late work meetings instead of just explaining what she was doing? I found the answer in an email she'd written to a friend, someone she'd apparently confided in when the weight of what she was doing became too much to bear alone. The friend had asked her the same question. Why don't you tell your husband? Why don't you ask for his help? My wife's response destroyed me. Because he wouldn't understand. He'd think I was being foolish, wasting our money on a stranger. He'd tell me that Eleanor isn't my responsibility, that I can't save everyone, that I need to think about our own retirement, our own future. And maybe he'd be right. Maybe I am being foolish. But I can't abandon her. When I look at Eleanor, I see my own mother. I see what could have happened to her if she hadn't had me to take care of her when she got sick. I see how cruel the world can be to people who have no one. And I can't let that happen to Eleanor. Even if it means lying to my husband, even if it means using money we should probably be saving, even if it means carrying this alone, I can't let her be alone. I closed the laptop and sat there in the silence of our home office, crying like I hadn't cried since I was a child. What had I done? What had I become that my own wife believed she couldn't trust me with her compassion? When had I turned into the kind of man who would need to be lied to about kindness? I thought about all the times over the years when I complained about her volunteer work, about the hours she spent at the homeless shelter or the animal rescue, or organizing charity drives. I thought about how I'd roll my eyes when she wanted to give money to panhandlers, or how I'd lecture her about being too soft-hearted, too naive about the way the world worked. She'd learned to hide her kindness from me. That's what our marriage had become. She felt she had to sneak around to help an elderly woman with dementia because she believed, correctly, I realized with a wave of shame, that I would object, that I would make her feel guilty for caring about someone who wasn't related to us, who wasn't our problem. I had to make a choice in that moment. I could confront her with what I knew, force her to explain herself, make her account for the lies. I could be righteous and indignant about the deception, about being kept in the dark. Or I could recognize that maybe I was a problem, that maybe the real issue wasn't her secrecy, but the kind of person I'd become, the kind of husband who made his wife feel she had to hide acts of human decency. I spent the next few days in a kind of crisis. Everything I thought I knew about myself, about my marriage, about my wife, had been turned upside down. I'd been so convinced that she was the one betraying our vows, but maybe I'd been betraying something more fundamental. The basic human obligation to be kind, to care about people who are suffering, to help when we can. The following Thursday, I made my own decision. I left work early and drove to that small craftsman house in that unfamiliar neighborhood. I rang the doorbell, my heart pounding. The caregiver answered, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes who looked confused to see me. I'm looking for Eleanor. I said, I'm a friend. She let me in, and I found Eleanor sitting in a comfortable chair by the window, looking out at the garden. She turned when I entered, her face lighting up with a smile, even though she clearly had no idea who I was. Hello, she said warmly. How wonderful to have a visitor. Do I know you? Not yet, I replied, sitting down across from her. But I'd like to get to know you if that's all right. We talked for an hour. Well, mostly Eleanor talked, and I listened. She told me about her childhood growing up on a farm in Iowa. She told me about meeting her husband at a USO dance during the war. She told me about her son, my wife's friend, who was a wonderful boy who should be visiting any day now. I didn't correct her. I just listened, and I understood. I understood why my wife had been doing this. Eleanor was delightful. She was kind and funny and full of stories. She deserved better than to spend her final years alone and confused in some overcrowded facility where she was just another patient, another problem to be managed. When I left, I asked the caregiver not to mention my visit. I wanted to talk to my wife first, on my own terms. That evening, when my wife came home from work, I was waiting for her in the living room. She looked surprised to see me sitting there. We need to talk, I said quietly. I saw the fear flash across her face. About what? About Eleanor, I replied. The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. What do you know about Eleanor? I took a deep breath. I know everything. I followed you. I read your emails. I know about the house, about the care you're paying for, about your Thursday visits. I know all of it. She sank into a chair, looking like she might be sick. I can explain, she started, but I held up my hand. Let me go first, I said. I need to say something, and I need you to hear it. What you've been doing for Eleanor, it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. And the fact that you felt you had to hide it from me, that you thought I wouldn't support you, that you believed you had to lie to me about it, that breaks my heart. Not because you lied, but because I made you feel like you had to. Tears were streaming down her face now. You're not angry? I'm angry at myself, I said. I'm angry that I become the kind of person you can't trust with your compassion. I'm angry that somewhere along the way, I lost sight of what's really important. I thought I was being practical, being responsible, being sensible about money and time and obligations. But really, I was just being cold. And you learned to hide your warmth from me because I made you feel like it was something to be ashamed of. She was sobbing now, and I moved to sit beside her, taking her hands in mine. I met Eleanor today. I continued softly. I went to see her, and I understand now why you couldn't walk away from her. She's wonderful. She deserves to have someone in her corner. And I'm so sorry that I made you feel like you had to fight for her alone. I didn't know what to do, my wife said through her tears. When I found out what was going to happen to her, I couldn't let them put her in one of those places. Not when she has no one to visit her, no one to advocate for her. But I knew you'd say we couldn't afford it, that it wasn't our responsibility, that you were right to think that. I interrupted. That's exactly what I would have said. Because I become someone who values money more than people, someone who thinks about retirement accounts instead of human beings. But I don't want to be that person anymore. What are you saying? She asked, looking at me with hope and confusion, and fear all mixed together in her expression. I'm saying that from now on we do this together. Eleanor is our responsibility now. Both of ours. We'll figure out the money. We'll make it work. And you don't have to carry this alone anymore. She collapsed into my arms, and we held each other and cried together like we hadn't done in years. All the distance had grown between us, all the walls we'd built, all the secrets we kept. It was like they melted away in that moment, leaving us raw and vulnerable, but finally honest with each other. The next Thursday, I went with her to visit Eleanor, and the Thursday after that, and the Thursday after that. It became our thing, our shared project, our reminder of what really matters. Eleanor passed away 6 months later, peacefully in her sleep in that little craftsman house. My wife and I were there, holding her hands, making sure she wasn't alone. At her funeral, which we arranged and paid for, we were the only ones there besides a caregiver and the funeral director. But we gave her the send-off she deserved. We told stories about her, celebrated her life, mourned her passing. Afterward, my wife turned to me and said, "Thank you for understanding, for being there, for helping her have dignity at the end." "Thank you," I replied, "for showing me what really matters, for being braver than I was, for caring even when it was hard, even when you thought I wouldn't support you. That experience changed us, changed our marriage. We're different now, better, I think, more honest, more open. We volunteer together now at a senior center. We've set up a small fund to help elderly people who don't have family support. It's our way of honoring Eleanor, of making sure her impact on our lives continues. But more than that, we talk now, really talk, about our fears and our hopes and our values, about what kind of people we want to be, what kind of legacy we want to leave. We don't hide things from each other anymore, not the big things, not the things that matter. And I've learned something profound from all of this. I learned that sometimes the secrets people keep aren't about betrayal or deception in the way we think. Sometimes people hide things because they're trying to protect something good, something pure, something they're afraid might be damaged if exposed to the harsh light of judgment or practicality. I learned that I needed to examine myself, to look hard at the kind of person I'd become and ask whether that was who I wanted to be. I learned that suspicion and doubt can poison a relationship, but so can indifference to suffering. I learned that sometimes what looks like betrayal is actually a desperate attempt to stay true to your own values in a relationship that doesn't seem to share them. Most importantly, I learned that my wife is a better person than I am. She was willing to sacrifice her own comfort, her own security, her own peace of mind, to help someone who had no claim on her except a claim of common humanity. And she did it expecting nothing in return, not even acknowledgement or credit or praise. So yes, I followed my wife without her knowing, and I discovered a shocking secret. But the secret wasn't what I expected. It wasn't infidelity or betrayal. It was goodness. It was compassion. It was the kind of selfless love that we claim to value, but so rarely practice. And the really shocking part, the part that I still struggle with sometimes, it's that she felt she had to hide that from me. That our marriage had deteriorated to the point where acts of kindness had to be conducted in secret, where helping someone in need was something to be ashamed of rather than celebrated. That's on me. That's my failure, my shortcoming, my wake-up call. So now I'm sitting here in my living room, not late at night this time, but in the afternoon light, and I'm thinking about all of this, about how close I came to destroying something beautiful, because I couldn't see past my own suspicions. About how I almost missed the opportunity to be part of something meaningful because I was too caught up in my own fears and insecurities. And I'm thinking about you, whoever you are, listening to this story. Maybe you're in a similar situation. Maybe you've noticed things that don't add up, behaviors that seem suspicious, secrets that are being kept. Maybe you're consumed with doubt and fear, wondering if your partner is betraying you, if the life you thought you had is built on lies. And here's what I want to tell you. Yes, sometimes those suspicions are justified. Sometimes people do betray their partners, do lie, do cheat, do destroy trust. I'm not naive enough to think that doesn't happen. But sometimes the truth is more complicated than that. Sometimes people keep secrets because they're trying to protect something, or because they're afraid of judgment, or because they've learned that their values aren't shared or understood by the person they love most. Before you act on your suspicions, before you follow someone or snoop through their phone or read their emails, ask yourself this. What kind of relationship have you created? Is it one where people feel safe being honest about their vulnerabilities, their fears, their acts of kindness? Or is it one where people have learned to hide parts of themselves, to protect the soft and tender parts of their hearts from criticism or mockery or dismissal? I'm not saying you should ignore red flags. I'm not saying you should accept lies or deception. What I'm saying is that maybe, just maybe, the problem isn't always what you think it is. Maybe the secret being kept is a symptom of a larger issue in the relationship, an indication that somewhere along the way, you created an environment where honesty feels too risky. What would you do if you were in my shoes? If you discovered that the betrayal you feared wasn't betrayal at all, but an act of love that your partner felt they had to hide from you? Would you have the humility to recognize your own role in creating that situation? Would you have the courage to change? I want to hear from you. I really do. Drop a comment below and tell me your thoughts. Have you ever kept a secret from your partner, not because you were doing something wrong, but because you were afraid of their judgment? Have you ever discovered that someone you loved was hiding something good rather than something bad? How did you handle it? And if this story resonates with you, if it makes you think about your own relationships in a new way, don't forget to like and subscribe. Share where you're watching from. Tell me your stories. Because we're all in this together, all trying to navigate the complicated territory of love and trust and honesty and human connection. The truth is, we're all keeping secrets of one kind or another. We all have parts of ourselves that we hide, that we protect, that we're afraid to expose. The question is, what kind of secrets are they? And what do those secrets say about the relationships we built? I thought I knew my wife. After 28 years, I thought I knew everything about her. But I was wrong. I didn't know the depth of her compassion. I didn't know the courage it took for her to do what she did. I didn't know how strong she was, how willing to sacrifice her own comfort for the sake of someone who couldn't repay her. And I didn't know myself either. I didn't know how cold I'd become, how focused on practical concerns at the expense of human ones. I didn't know that I created an atmosphere in my own home where kindness had to be conducted in secret. But I know now, and that knowledge has changed everything. So here's my final thought. The thing I want to leave you with. The secrets people keep are often a mirror. They reflect back to us the kind of environment we've created, the kind of person we become, the kind of relationship we've built. If you find yourself suspecting your partner of keeping secrets, by all means investigate if you must. But also take a long, hard look at yourself and ask why those secrets are being kept. Sometimes the most shocking secret isn't what someone else is hiding. It's what we've been hiding from ourselves. Our own failings, our own shortcomings, our own role in creating the very situation we fear most. I followed my wife and discovered something shocking. But the most shocking thing wasn't what she was doing. It was what I'd become. And in the end, that was the secret I really needed to uncover. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps you, challenges you, makes you think about your own relationships in a new way. Because that's all any of us can do. Keep learning, keep growing, keep trying to become better versions of ourselves. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. What's your story? I'm waiting to hear it.